5G and Industry 4.0 take 0.
This video was sponsored by EasyVPN. Stick around to the end of this video to learn more.
All right, so actually, Zach and I came up with the idea to shoot this video driving into the office this morning. Yesterday I sat on a panel, an industry panel for 5G and IoT for a company called Tech Data for their IoT symposium that was sponsored by Intel and a bunch of other folks. And it got us thinking, you know, we ought to shoot a video for our audience discussing 5G and how it's going to impact Industry 4.0 use cases. All right, so in this video, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna try and do it all in basically 10 minutes. So 5G and Industry 4.0, to start out, what is 5G, okay? To understand 5G, the first thing we need to understand is 4G. All right, so you may know that in cellular technology, there's basically been, we have 5 generations of technology in cellular. The first 2 generations were communication only. Basically, think of it as really fancy walkie-talkies. That's what cell phones were, really, where you were just basically relaying walkie-talkie information through radio towers. That was the first 2 generations. The third generation with CDMA gave us the ability to transmit data. So then we could start doing multimedia messaging, we could send video, we could send audio files, we could download audio files, we could get on the internet. But obviously, if you remember the 3G days, we couldn't do that very well. 4G introduced LTE. Okay, and basically what 4G did was it went from basically dial-up speeds that you saw with 3G to DSL speeds that you saw with 4G, where I could now download high-speed, I could download high-definition video, you know, basically anything that worked with 20 megasecond or less. So that's basically the speed of LTE, right, 4G. And now 5G is essentially an extension of that of the existing cellular technology. But what's really important to note is that in practice, 5G is a lot more than what 4G was. Okay, that is in terms of how it's going to change our lives. Up until this point, up until the introduction of 5G, you had basically 2 types of networks that everyone was dealing with. You had cellular networks that we're dealing with, and then we had our Ethernet networks that we're dealing with, Wi-Fi and physical. And I would use cellular when I'm mobile and I'm on the go, and because of that, I would limit the things I would do when I was on the go and I was mobile. Okay, I would have to accept concessions when I'm on those networks. And then if I needed to do something super fast, or I needed to upload a huge file or transfer huge files, I would do that stuff within the confines of my safe Ethernet or Wi-Fi network, right? The faster, more broadband, okay? 5G merges all of it together. Okay, so right now when we first start talking, start thinking right now that 5G isn't just an extension of cellular network, but it's also a replacement of what you have at home, okay? So think of it in those terms, not just at home, but what you have in your office. So 4G, real simple, LTE, which gave us high-speed data transfer, okay? The really important points of 4G, okay? You had limited connections, you had high latency, that is how long does it take for a message to come back? So latency is when I send a request, how long does it take for me to get my round trip? With 4G, you would see latencies of say 50 milliseconds to 250 milliseconds round trip. So I may have had really wide bandwidth. I may have had lots of bandwidth, but the speed at which it would take for a response to come back to me would be a long time round trip. That's called latency. And if you ever want to test this, just download Ookla's speed test, look at it. It'll show you latency, and it's going to give you 2 things. Latency, which is how fast the communication, how fast did I receive my response, and then bandwidth, which is how much room is there on the road for me to download stuff, okay, per second, okay? So limited connections, high latency, and decent bandwidth, okay? And because of that, and because 4G was really like a digital subscriber line, so if you want to compare 4G in terms of mobile networks to your home network, it's really the equivalent of like DSL, okay? 5G is the equivalent of fiber. All right, so most of us went DSL to cable, okay, to fiber. Okay, that's what most of us did. So DSL, and then we went to like Roadrunner, Time Warner's Roadrunner, and then we went to fiber, okay? 4G is DSL, 5G is fiber for mobile networks, skipping right over the cable speeds, skipping right over the cable latencies, okay? So 5G has, so in terms of limited connections, to put it in perspective, 5G, with 4G you can get tens of thousands of connections in one local network, okay? So I can have tens of thousands of nodes connected to a tower, okay? With 5G, I get millions connections. So the number of devices that I can connect in a local network went from tens of thousands to millions with 5G. Number two, we get fiber latency. So if 4G gives me 25 to 250 milliseconds round trip for a communication, we're seeing 1 to 2 milliseconds with 5G. 1 to 2 milliseconds, okay? That's fiber speed. If you go on a fiber connection, okay? If you go on a fiber connection, because it moves at the speed of light, literally. If you go on a fiber connection, you'll see latency of 1 to 2 milliseconds. And you have 500x speeds. So a combination of the latency, the really low latency, and the 100 times the bandwidth that you get with 4G equals speeds. You can download things at 500 times the speed you could with 4G. Okay, so it's 100 times more bandwidth. It's a factor of 5 in terms of latency reduction, which translates into 500 times increase in speed. Okay, so what does that mean? There's one other piece I want to talk about before we talk about what it means for Industry 4.0. Okay, so a couple of other benefits of 5G. Okay, so if the initial benefits of 5G are we have lower latency, we have more bandwidth, we can have way more connections. Okay, thousands of more connections, thousands of times more connections in one local network, and I end up with 500x speed improvement. Okay, so I'm literally going from like DSL networks with limited connections to fiber with millions and millions of connections. Okay, what are the other benefits of 5Gs we need to point out? So there's two key ones. There's mesh technology, okay, and there is device to device technology. And I'm not going to get into the technical details. I want to keep this. So right now, if any of you at home have bought, say, like the TP-Link Deco system, which is a Wi-Fi mesh technology, where you basically most of us have just a Wi-Fi router in our house, one router, and you'll notice as you move through your house, you're going to get better connection in some areas than you will in other. Wi-Fi mesh, so mesh technology, allows you to take many nodes, access points that you can broadcast from and devices can connect to, all on the same network with a little piece of software on the top of it that manages that basically apportions bandwidth out to those units, okay? 5G supports mesh technology, okay? And leverages mesh technology far better than 4G is capable of. Another thing that 5G does is it optimizes the radio spectrum way better than 4G, okay? The last thing is 5G supports device-to-device communication. So you may have heard 5G makes it possible to support device-to-device. So not only will my phone or my tablet be a 5G client, but it also could be a 5G host. It can share the network with a device that can talk to me, but can't maybe get back to the tower, okay? So those are two other benefits of 5G that sort of change the game, all right? So what are the implications here, okay? So what does it mean for industry? Okay, so before we do that, let's talk about how the current network in a manufacturing facility looks. So within the confines of the plant, Okay? We have a LAN, a local area network that is obviously a VLAN, and let's say it's our process network. Okay? So, 192.168.8.x, right? I will then have my LAN, which probably also a VLAN, which is our business network. Okay? This is all physical Ethernet or wireless Wi-Fi. Okay? All of those things, all of this goes back to the core. Okay? So I've got a place in my plant. I've got one place in the plant that gives me my access, physical access to the internet. And that's called our core. And everything is an extension of that, okay? If I move outside of the physical confines of this network, then I have moved off of, I have eliminated my ability to communicate with my process network without coming up with some way to get to it through this internet connection, okay? Right? Same thing with the business. If I move outside of my physical ability to connect to that network, then I've got to use some other way of communicating, okay? Now, the quality of this connection is a function of what's available in that area physically. What physical fiber or physical white copper, physical fiber is available to connect into that core. And it's a function of how much money I spend on the infrastructure at each of these layers. The quality of the switches. Am I using gigabit? The quality of the switches, the quality of the physical infrastructure, the Ethernet cables. Am I having my electricians do the terminations and all of them are really crap? I can see the copper wire sticking out the end of the cable. I'm not using the IEC standard, or I'm not meeting the IEC standard when I'm making the terminations on my patch cables, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? How does 5G change all of that? Well, number one, I want to illustrate here. When I move away from this area of the network, I basically disconnected myself from the ability of being connected to that network. Okay? So what does 5G do? What does 5G mean? Okay? So for your personal life, right now you have Wi-Fi at home. You have your good network at home, Wi-Fi. The further away you move from your router, the more likelihood, the lower the quality of the connection you have to your network, and the likelihood you're going to be disconnected from that network. So imagine this. If you walk outside into your yard and you walk out to the furthest reaches of your property, you're suddenly off your home network because you're not connected to it. 5G, the concept of the 5G is this. Imagine technology that allows you to be connected to your home network no matter where you go. So imagine as you walk out into the driveway, when you normally would disconnect from your home network, you would sit down in your car and you would start to drive away and you'd still be on your home network. And as you drove down the road and as you took a right to go to the grocery store, you're still on your home network. You'd never disconnected from it because the infrastructure of your home network is everywhere. And it's faster, more bandwidth, it's faster, has more bandwidth, and allows more connections than what you have in your own home. Okay? That's the implications in your personal life. The personal implication of 5G is that you're always going to be on your home network, your home Wi-Fi. You're always going to be on your business network. You're always going to be on the actual physical work network, the actual physical home network. That's the implication of 5G. And it's all going to be as fast as if I had a direct fiber connection in my home. That's the implications. All right, so now start thinking about that. All right, so work. What does it mean? Oh, personal. Always on the home network. Okay? So what does it mean? What are the implications for industry? Well, number one, it's going to eliminate the need to spend money on the capital to create this infrastructure and spend money on the OpEx to maintain this infrastructure. It will reduce The amount of money I've got to spend on all this stuff.
It's almost like Industry 4.0.
Correct. What's going to happen is overnight with 5G, the infrastructure every manufacturer needs to connect everything will just be there. Literally overnight, it'll just be there. Okay? This is a really, really important point. Okay, it's a very important point. The fundamental implication for Industry 4.0 with 5G is that when 5G gets turned on in your area, now whether the manufacturing facility uses private 5G, right, creates their own private 5G infrastructure, which is what I think a lot of people are going to end up doing, or whether they decide we're going to use the public 5G infrastructure and protect it, create local networks within that. The infrastructure for every manufacturer will literally, with the flip of a switch, be in place. And overnight, every person will have, every node in the plant, every smart thing will be able to be plugged directly into that network like that. No need for a drop, okay? No need to upgrade the core. No need to upgrade this ISP. Zach.
So the question that the audience will ask is, so can I do, will this replace my LAN? Or will there still need to be applications where LAN connectivity is necessary? Because of the redundancy within the network, can I start doing like process control-ish? Do I need a LAN still?
So I would say this. The real implication for 5G is going to be in data transfer, but it's not going to be in control. Control is still going to be physical. It's still going to be physical networks with physical cables plugging into the PLC. That doesn't mean that the PLC isn't going to support 5G connectivity, right? But the process control is not going to happen over 5G, at least not in the short term. The real implications initially is going to be in the acquisition of data and the publishing of information. That's really the implications for 5G. It makes connectivity, it means connecting to everything, acquiring the data that everything has, and pushing information to those things much easier. Why? Because we're eliminating this barrier to entry, which is all of this capital investment required to just get you infrastructure. I mean, we're working with a really large bakery company, right? And they have, 40 to 60 bakeries all over the United States that they want to upgrade, right? And they're literally going from like Industry 2.8 to Industry 4.0. And it's not a gradual process for them. They stopped at 2.8, and what they discovered is, holy shit, we have to spend ungodly amounts of money at every single facility to just upgrade the infrastructure, okay? Now these guys have to do that. I mean, they can't rely on 5G yet. They could go to a private 5G, which we haven't talked about. But they're spending all this money on this infrastructure. And guess what? At what cost? At the cost of being able to invest in solutions later on down the road. So, and remember, if you remember from the masterclass, what do manufacturers? If manufacturers have this amount of money, but they have this amount of problems, so they've got to decide at which point they can no longer afford to solve problems. Okay? So if what we can do is look for opportunities to reduce capital they have to invest in infrastructure, in human resource, etc., then what we can do is we can go further down this runway solving problems. And hopefully what we do is we generate the money needed to finish solving more problems, right? Right now what happens is manufacturers, they have a finite amount of capital. They solve all their problems standalone. They're not one part of a bigger whole. It's not part of a process. It's not part of a digital strategy. And they have capital that they can spend on specific use cases. And those use cases give them a finite amount of return. They're not generating capital to solve the future use cases, right? Because they're not approaching it strategically. They're not using the right technology. They're not working with the right partners, right? The implications for 5G is that instead of spending, that chunk of money on infrastructure, we get to save that chunk of money and get a longer piece of the runway by solving problems with those dollars, okay? All right, 5G, is it a big deal? It's absolutely a huge fucking deal. It's an enormous deal. If you want to learn more about 5G, if you want, what other resources can you look at? The best place to read about 5G is on Qualcomm's website. They have a great FAQ, Q&A thing. Is 5G, like right now you keep hearing 5G, is 5G going to impact the way you do your job? Absolutely, 100%, without a doubt. It's going to affect the way you run your business. It's going to affect the way that you do your job. Start your research now. Starting with this video, this means you're obviously on the right track. Start your research now, because 5G is literally like bringing fiber optic connections to everyone within the network wirelessly. Okay? I mean, think about that. The implications of 5G are staggering. I think the projections are something like $11 trillion of growth in the economy over the next 10 years. $11 trillion. I know that this year alone, we're going from like $4 billion economic impact of 5G to next year, $40 billion. That's the growth. So start doing your homework on 5G. Start playing with 5G. If you want to learn more about it, go to Qualcomm's website.
We also have we created a 5G channel within the Discord server.
Oh, and we created a 5G channel within the Discord server as well. I forgot about that, where you can ask questions and share ideas. All right, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Peace out. So this month's sponsor is EasyVPN. If you guys don't know EasyVPN, these guys, we keep talking about the IO Hub. In a nutshell, IO Hub is basically an IoT platform. And I've been testing deploying their various industrial containers using Docker with IO Hub. Pretty dope. Actually, a lot of dope. A lot of sick. Awesome. I actually think this technology, if what they're promising, they're actually delivering on, it is, in fact, like major game changers. It's an extension of what we've already been. It really has to do with the ability to widely manage and deploy across an enterprise at an even faster rate than we currently are.